What do Spotify, Comcast, and Netflix have in common? This is going to be the topic that we're exploring this week in Impactful Teamwork. So, super excited to have you here today. My name's Julia Felton, and I'm your host and guide for about the next 20 minutes while we delve into this really interesting topic of what I call shared leadership or co leadership. So, let's just start by asking you a question. Are you carrying too much of the leadership burden? Because if you're like most business leaders that I work with, you're juggling strategy, decisions, and delivery, and your team often looks to you for every answer. And this creates a big problem in your business. This creates bottlenecks, it slows down execution, and it leaves you stressed, overwork, and sometimes teetering on burnout. So the thing is, it doesn't have to be this way. There is a new way to lead. And in today's fast changing world, leadership can't just sit on one person's shoulder. A number of you will have heard me talk about this many times on the podcast. There is just too much information out there nowadays for one person to be expected to know everything. Yes, in the industrial era, before the days of the internet, right? Maybe you worked in a factory and the factory manager, he knew everything, right? Because our sphere of knowledge was so tiny compared to what we have today. But nowadays, with Dr. Google out there and Mr. ChatGPT, right? There's so much everybody can find out. So there's no way one person can know everything. What I'm proposing is that leadership can't sit on one person's shoulders, and it has to be shared, distributed, and collaborative. And we need this shared leadership so that momentum doesn't grind to a halt. Every time you're stuck in back-to-back meetings, you don't have time to make a decision on what's happening in the business. And so, of course, the business falters and nothing can happen until you have the bandwidth to, say, make that decision. So one of the big challenges that we find, though, is that a lot of leaders aren't willing to share the leadership with their colleagues. And I think this is a really flawed strategy because that is what Comcast, Netflix, and Oracle all have in common. They have all recently announced that they are engaging in co-leadership. So it seems like this is a really important topic for us to be talking about right now, because finally, industries are beginning to realize the importance of sharing this leadership. And to me, it's no irony that the companies that are actively pursuing co-leadership at the moment and co-CEOs of their business are actually in the tech space, the space where there is the most rapid change in the marketplace at the moment. So as I'd said, why do companies like Oracle, Comcast, Netflix, and Spotify, why are they looking at a co-leadership model? And I think in addition to realizing that in the fast, complex, interconnected world in which we live, that no person can know everything or decide everything, they've also realized that this hero leadership model is really outdated. And they've appreciated that shared leadership can drive business momentum. Because in today's world, the CEO must be a part statesman, a part lobbyist, a supply chain guru, a technologist, a therapist, a cheerleader, a brand manager, and also a bean counter, right? So we're expecting our CEOs to be big picture and also detailed. And we know that's incredibly difficult to find people that have those two different sets of thinking at the same time. And that's what's making it so difficult for organizations to find a single person that can tick all of the boxes. And so I would suggest that is why companies are now looking towards shared leadership. So the great thing about shared leadership is a Harvard Business Review in 2022 showed that companies with co-CEOs, so shared leadership, outperform their peers on shareholder returns. generating on average 9.5% versus 6.9% for the peer groups. So this is really interesting. It's two brains better than one, right? So for shareholders, they're actually making more money when you have a co-CEO. And interestingly, the tenure of the CEOs in the models were virtually the same at about 5 years. So it didn't matter if you were a single CEO or you had co-CEOs. Roughly, CEOs were lasting about 5 years in the role. However, that's not to say that co-leadership isn't without problems. And there are examples where co-CEO solutions blew up. But I think it's really important here to say that this wasn't because of the structure of co-leadership and shared leadership that this happened, but it was rather the personalities involved and the implementation of the arrangement. So let's just take this example. It's Salesforce, and their CEO and co-founder and chair is Mark Benioff. And he's actually made 2 failed attempts to add a co-CEO. And the problem has been that actually Mark Benioff really has not wanted to share the power. It's his company. He founded it. He's wanted to protect it. So that's what's really caused the problem. It's been personalities, and it's been the ego of the leader to not want to let that go. And one of the reasons that originally that Salesforce looked towards the co-CEO solution was as a way of keeping great talent within the organization. Because we all know that one of the challenges in organizations where we've still got this pyramid structure is that people move up the ranks and you get to a point where you can't progress any further. So I remember this very vividly, myself, my own experience when I was in one of my early roles in the hospitality industry. I was the deputy front office manager at Gleneagles Hotel, a very prestigious luxury golf resort in Scotland. And my boss, a lady called Mary Affleck, she had been in the role as front office manager for like about 15 years. And there was no way she was going to move. So there was very little opportunity for promotion for me within the organization. Yes, I could have moved sideways into a different department, so I could have done a lateral move, but there was no natural progression there. And as a result of that, I left. And I've also experienced the same problem when I was in corporate and I was running the hotel benchmark survey. Because I brought in data analysts to analyze all of my hotel data. And after a couple of years, to be honest, they were ready to move on. But at that time, the business was quite small and I just didn't have other roles for them to go to. So I had to appreciate that they would move on. We tried to move them laterally into hotel consulting roles where possible. And if not, they actually ended up leaving the company. But thankfully, often became clients when they were in their new roles, which was great. But this is a real challenge that we've got, is how do we keep great talent? And maybe this shared leadership is an opportunity and an answer to that. Now, SAP also had a short-lived experiment with shared leadership in 2020, and that largely failed due to poor execution. And Bloomberg News reported at the time that the problem with having the co-CEOs was that often people needed to get sign-off from 2 different people, and they weren't often located in the same area. As I believe, if I recall this correctly, one CEO was based in the US and one was in Germany. So you can imagine how that drove people crazy if they needed to get both of them to sign off. We've got a time difference, right? And just the logistics of doing that really created a problem in those organizations. So that was the execution of the co-CEO and unclear decision-making pathways that really contributed to the problem. So the current gold standard in terms of shared leadership is actually happening at Netflix, and that's had 2 different CEO co-formulations. The first was with the chairman and founder Reed Hastings and Ted Sarandos, and now it's with Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters. And the reason it's worked so well at Netflix is the 2 executives have got complementary personalities. So what do we mean by that? Peters, he's the data's guy, and Sarandus goes more by gut. So there's a clear division of work and labor. So Sarandus owns the content, the marketing, the legal, the comms, and the publicity, whilst Peters oversees product and tech, advertising, HR, and gaming. And the other great thing about these two people being co-CEOs is that they have worked together for about a decade prior to becoming co-CEOs. So they already understood about how each other operated, each other's strengths, and therefore how they could partner together to bring the best benefits to the company. One of the other benefits of shared leadership and co-CEOs is also that the co-CEOs have a sounding board. They have somebody else to talk to who is at their level. And I think that's super helpful because I know, being the CEO of a small business, how lonely it can be and how challenging it can be when you've not got a sounding board around you, somebody to bounce ideas off. And this is why things like virtual boards can work very well for smaller businesses. But actually having somebody within your own business who understands it, understands the dynamics, and can share ideas and you can bounce things off of, I think is really important. And of course, the other great thing that Netflix has is, although Sarandos and Greg Peters are the co-CEOs, Reed Hastings is still involved with the company as the chair. So in the event that there is any conflict, there is still a referee who can make the final call if things do get heated. So I think we can probably all agree that no single leader can any longer meet the demands placed on them. And therefore, this is why there's a growing recognition for the need for highly effective leadership teams. And this is why I'm so passionate about this concept of teamship. Teamship is the idea of shared leadership across the organization. And we're bringing the right people together at the right time. Now, teamship doesn't just have to exist at the CEO level, but on any project level, we can bring different people together to lead that project team or that execution team whenever is needed. And if we can bring the right people together, the impact on the business in terms of increased momentum, better decision making, speed to market, better productivity, all of these things are amplified when we have shared leadership. So where does this concept of shared leadership come from? And how can we execute it in our business? So I first came across the concept of shared leadership in the horse herds, because the horse herds have a single purpose, and that is really to stay alive. As prey animals, that's their big challenge. When's a mountain lion going to come and eat them? So they actually create what we call a diamond model of leadership. And when you look at a horse herd out in the wild, you'll have a lead mare at the front, a stallion, which is a male horse at the back, and what we call sentinels at the side. So each of these areas, the front, the middle, and the sides, are different areas of leadership where you can actually lead in different ways. So if you're leading from the front, this is what we call directional leadership. It's the visionary leadership. It's all about setting the course, the pace, and the destination. So the energy when somebody's leading from the front is one of clarity and purpose. Where are we going and why? And often in a business, this might be the CEO or the strategist. And as I said, in a herd, it's the lead mare guiding the herd towards food and water and safety. But when you're leading from the front, the challenge is that you don't necessarily know what's happening behind you. So that can be a problem. So what we've seen is CEOs go off, set great vision, great direction, and off they go, and they leave the team behind them, either because they haven't communicated the vision effectively or people haven't understood what's happening. And actually, what I find when people come to my Unbridled Success retreats, so these are my immersive leadership, experiential leadership retreats with the horses, actually learning that there are different ways that we can lead is one of the most liberating things that a CEO can find out about themselves. So leading from the front is pace, direction, and destination. Then you have leading from behind. So this is more a bit like delivery leadership, and it's the doer. And this is where things happen. This is about action, execution, and implementation. And it's the energy that turns those ideas into impact. So when we ending up leading from behind, I think this is a very powerful position of leadership. But it only works if people in your team, for example, are very clear on the vision and direction you're going in. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But when people are clear on that vision and direction, then all you need to do when you're leading from behind is put enough energy behind to get the team moving, and then just keep them on track. And actually, from your perspective, it doesn't involve a lot of energy. And actually, when leaders come and work with the horses and they experience leading from behind, they realize how much energy they actually have and how it's not really a tiring leadership position. You've got the advantage when you're leading from behind of seeing everything in front of you, seeing what's happening, which is very powerful. And you've also got the advantage of being able to see the problems before they come to light. And then we've got leading from the side or leading from the middle. And this is all about relational leadership, and it's all about being the connector. So this is where we create alignment and trust and connection across the team. And in a herd, it's this energy that keeps the group together, and it's what allows them to move as one. So in business, relational leaders hold the space for conversations, ensuring voices are heard, and they nurture collaboration. And without this energy, silos form and you get conflict, friction, and disengagement. And I often think about relational leadership as the heart of leadership, because this is where we build all those really powerful relationships that we need within the business. The challenge is, though, as a leader, if you just stay in this position of leadership, is that sometimes you find decisions aren't made because everyone's being nice to everybody. We're building relationships, but nobody actually wants to take a decision. So 3 positions of leadership: leading from the front, leading from behind, and leading from the middle. This relates to something that we call the diamond model of leadership, which was created by a company called Teaching Horse that I also facilitate with. I'm one of their international facilitators. And at the diamond model of leadership, in the front position, we have attention. So every leader needs to pay attention to where they're going. At the bottom of the diamond, we have energy. Every leader needs to bring energy to the interactions within the team or within the business. And on the left, we have congruence, and on the right, we have direction. So all leaders need to have congruence. That's that authenticity to do what they say they're going to do. And they also have to have clarity on the direction that they're going in. Now, I appreciate in the world that we live in today, sometimes that direction, we might only have that direction for a day, an hour, 5 or 10 minutes because of the rapid changing of the world around us. But we know broadly the way that we're going. We know, for example, if we're in the UK and you had to set direction, are we going north or south? That's a relatively straight decision we can make. So as a business, is it that we are going to engage in rapid expansion and scaling up? Or is the business decision that we're actually going to solidify our position of where we are? So we can have some sense of the direction and course of travel. And it's really important. This diamond model of leadership is really important, whether you are a single CEO or a co-CEO, or you're leading a team or you're a department head. Because in order for your team members to trust you, they need to know 4 things about you. They need to know that you're paying attention and you can detect even the most subtle changes in the environment. They know that you can give them clear direction and you know how to respond to this. They know that you'll be able to give direction with focused energy, providing the team with the guidance and the pace on which to respond. So I think this energy is really interesting because what we have seen, and I'd refer you to a podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about a CEO with scattered energy. It's really important that the leader has consistent energy. And that in energy, the amount of that energy will change over time. So you start with a kind of low level energy to get things going. But if things don't start moving, then you need to crescendo your energy up, but not in that dysfunctional, scattered energy that I spoke about on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, but in a very structured way so that it's laser-like. And also, our team members will only place trust in us in a leader if we're congruent and our inner and outer actions and worlds are authentic and combined together. Because when our team members know that as leaders, we have their best interests as our source of motivation at all times, they know that they're working in an environment where health, harmony, and unity are maintained. So this is very important. And what I like about this model of shared leadership is that we are able, therefore, to get different perspectives on everything happening. And I think that's really valuable. This diversity of thought, diversity of perspective is a super valuable commodity that we have within the organization. Everybody can see things differently. In the horse herd, they're all together, they're all working as one. And different horses might spot the danger, the mountain lion approaching, the challenges, and then they can enable everyone to respond. And this is the problem if you've just got the single CEO looking for any danger or opportunities, things can get missed. Share the decision making and opportunity identification across the team, and you get a much more holistic picture of what's happening. So a few questions for you as we bring this to a close. Where does your leadership sit right now? Is it concentrated with one person? And if so, it's probably you. Or is it distributed across the team? And when we think of that diamond model with the directional, relational, and delivery leadership, which one is overused? Because if we've got too much direction, we get bottlenecks in the business. If we have too much delivery, people get exhausted. And if we've got too much relational energy, there's too much consensus about what's happening and we get no action. And so the magic is in balancing and rotating these options. Because just like the herd of horses, the team's strength comes from shared awareness. Sometimes one person leads, sometimes another steps up, but everyone influences and everyone contributes, and that's shared leadership in action. So as we bring this to a close, I'd really love you to think about within your organizations, where could you think about co-leadership, shared leadership? And which of the positions of leadership do you naturally gravitate to? And maybe who do you need as a wingman in a different position? So I've given you a lot there today, and this is such a fascinating topic about shared leadership. If you want a bit more information, I'd encourage you to check out my YouTube channel at Business Horsepower, where I actually recently gave one of my 20-minute talks was actually on the whole topic of shared leadership. It was called From Command to Collaboration, Why Shared Leadership is the Key to Business Momentum. So you want to go over there, you can actually see some slides and some visuals of actually how shared leadership can work in action. So once again, thank you for your time and attention today. Hope you found it useful, and I look forward to catching you again next week. Bye-bye.